Hi, my name is Marco, and today we're going to be changing out a front sprocket on this beautiful Ducati motorcycle. So let's get to work. Alright, so the first thing to do is get access to it. And on this model motorcycle, there's a plastic cover that comes off, along with 3 bolts. Excuse me, 2 bolts. Okay, here it is. So this is the front sprocket. This is a Ducati, and I think Ducati's 2003 and earlier had 2 bolts holding a lock washer on. Some of the Japanese bikes have a big bolt with a washer behind it that bends up to lock it in place. So I'm going to pull these off. Put it in gear. So, loosen. I think what I'm going to have to do here is I'm going to have to loosen the rear wheel and back the adjusters all the way up before I can get the front sprocket off. Using a breaker bar for this because you get torque pretty tight. So take your time. I was just loosening it enough just to get it to slide forward. Okay, so the reason we're changing the sprocket on this bike is because the bike is geared way too high. It comes from the factory that way. I think what they did when they came out with this bike to pass EPA tests, sound tests, they had to have the engine turning at a really low RPM, and that way they can sell this bike with a pretty high flow exhaust and still has a pretty high performance engine. And an easy way to get the gear ratio down to human levels is to put a different sprocket on the front. This is a 15-tooth sprocket, and this is a 14-tooth sprocket, and I'm going to put this on to make the bike geared a little lower so it's a little more manageable on the street. It makes first gear a little bit easier to get going, and 6th gear is not just in the stratosphere. This is the clutch slave cylinder, and it's a hydraulic cylinder that activates the clutch, and in this case it's a little bit in the way here, so I'm going to get it out of the way so I'll have a little bit more room here to play with. See what happens here. There we go. When you take a slave cylinder off, make sure you don't touch the clutch lever. That'll blow the piston right out of this thing. You want to put grease on the splines here before you put it on, because if you don't, then things can get rusty, they can seize up, it's not going to operate properly. Okay, now we're ready to install the new sprocket. It's pretty much a reverse of taking it off. a matter of lining up all the stuff. There we go. There's teeth on the output shaft that need to be lined up. There we go. Got grease on there. Things lubricated. All right. A little groove here that this has to go in, and then it'll turn freely. Since this system depends on a couple of bolts to hold it together, it's always a good idea to put some thread locker, just a drop of removable Loctite on the threads. One is safety wire. This one doesn't have any safety wire holes. Of course, they can be drilled and safety wired, but a much easier way is to use Loctite. So you just put about a drop right there where it goes into the sprocket, and just screw it in. And that should hold it. The other one, just about a drop. That's all you need. Make sure you use removable Loctite. If you use the high strength stuff, you might never get the bolts out next time you change a sprocket. Once I get that one seated just a little bit, I'll seat this one, and then I'll tighten it. Okay. You don't want to over tighten these because it's actually a fairly small bolt. If you over tighten them, you could strip the threads. I'm going to make sure everything's in place that we took off. This particular style of clutch slave cylinder has an O-ring seal, so I'm just making sure that it's there before we put it on, and that it has some grease on it. Since this kind of slides underneath the clutch slave cylinder, I'm going to put this on first. So put that on. Just going to get a bolt started. It's still loose. Get the other one started. Okay, now the slave cylinder. You don't want to put just one in and tighten it all the way down, because this has to go on evenly. If it doesn't go on evenly, you could break something. At a time on each one until it's on. You want to get it hand tight, and if you want to be a stickler about it, you can use a torque wrench. These are aluminum cases, and if you over torque it, you could actually strip the threads. In my case, I have a calibrated elbow. This isn't really the best way to do it here. Now that the sprocket is changed, there's something else you have to do. When you put a different size sprocket on it, the chain is going to be out of adjustment. So the next thing we have to do is adjust the chain, and that's going to be our next video. Once it's all back together, you might want to roll your rear wheel, make sure it all looks like it's running smoothly, silently, nothing's hanging up, and then you're ready to ride.